Cam, you got Jen on here as well.
Hi Jennifer, how are
Cam.
you? Hey, how are you?
Hello. Happy Friday.
Yeah, happy Friday. Good to be here.
Jen's a former client and a friend, and we had great connections around Speed of Trust years ago, and she's
Love it.
doing some really exciting stuff in the space of change and a lot of
Perfect.
emotional intelligence and connection with
Mhm.
people and the people side of as AI is emerging. That's
Yes.
kind of the space where she's playing.
Yep.
Love it. Way cool. Way cool. Excited to learn more.
Awesome.
Okay. All right, my friends. Should we go ahead, Derek? Anything you want to touch on before we?
We're thanks for Cam Brewer and Key Learning Solutions for being a partner with us on these webcasts. And then it's great to have Jen joining us today and look forward to some of this great content Michael's been working on and refining. And from
Nice.
what I understand, even last night, making some additional
my
very
flight my flight from DC through Chicago to Salt Lake.
Yes.
yeah, making some very relevant and current updates. So go ahead, Michael. And I don't know if you have one of your first couple slides there, a little bit of the intro
Yeah,
for what
totally.
Michael's doing
Yeah,
with Simpson Executive Coaching. And I partner with Michael over growth and client outcomes. And we're glad to have you with us today.
Yeah. Thanks for having us.
good. And this kind of preview of this content, some will feel very familiar. I've leveraged obviously a lot of the content out of this book here.
Perfect.
Powerful leadership through coaching. And then I'm doing an 8-week master class at the Chamber of Commerce with a number of, colleagues and speakers. Um, Stephen M.R. Covey is part of the
Hmm.
master class. Sean Moon, CEO of Zero Res, former colleague at Covey. A number of others, Corbin Church, CEO of iHub and CEO of Alto Bank. So we kind of have this 8-week masterclass. I'll be talking about this primarily in my kickoff session for this 8-week
Sure.
masterclass as well. And so we all kind of know each other here. I won't spend too much time boring you on the details of background. Um, you know, love the space of coaching and leadership, and I've got some great partnerships along the way. Both written a few books along the way of leadership and coaching, and those are listed there below, a few of them. And really this idea that leveraging some empirical research through being a fellow at Harvard and then also my relationship with Columbia and being on faculty there and certifying coaches worldwide with Dr. Terry Maltby for years, and some of the other partnerships along the way. Really, this idea is creating a dialogue. I think we had a little conversation before we started, and Jen brought this up around AI and the emergence of change, and so we kind of look at change from outside in, and we look for change from inside out. And today, in that context, we'll be talking primarily about the change inside out.
Hmm.
It's my relationship, me with me, and me
Hmm.
with how I show up in my relationships as a leader.
Yeah.
And so, and I think I have a highlight there of just a few clients I've had a chance to work with. Jen was obviously a great partner and colleague at GE. We had a lot of fun together. Cam's been a great partner and colleague with his global team at Key Learning. And it's kind of gives a little context. A few clients I've worked with. I want you to think about this idea of how do I design and define my life? And we have a whole person. We're not just a worker. We're not just at home. We're not, there's many different dimensions of the whole person. And so that's sort of one aspect we're going to discuss here in our short time together. But we're going to start off first with what's my relationship, me with me?
Hmm.
Like, how do I work on me? And so I want to give you some both research and some tools to think about that, particularly in this advent of AI. When you think about AI brings in all this technical brilliance and content and information and speed and there's so much great relevance to this wonderful innovative aspect of AI. And it's going to be bringing about tremendous change, both in the way we do business, the way we communicate, the way we interact. And certainly there will be jobs lost, and there will be industries and jobs gained that we haven't even thought of. And so it's an exciting time in this sort of third industrial revolution, if you will, that's coming. And so the first question I like to think about, what sets us apart as leaders? And when you think about this, the job of leadership, it's this idea of how we think. It's our mindset. What's, they say the most important conversation you have every day is the conversation with yourself.
Mhm.
And it's my mindset drives everything. And so I'd like you to be thinking about, as a leader, how do I think? How do I respond? We all have triggers. We all have responses, right? And then it's leaders, who are you, right? Who you are. There's purpose, there's values, there's contribution, there's legacy, there's meaning, there's mission. And so we want to come from a place of purpose, a place of values that are linked and aligned with our motivations and our mindset. We also want to think about the actions we take, the behaviors, the conversations, right? And all of those things lead to what we get, our results. And so all of us want to be about greatness. And you ask yourself the question, well, why do so few get it, right? And we can kind of logically go back and say, where does the drivers of our results start from? And I think there's a very logical path, and even based on empirical research, it's mindset, it's motivation, purpose, it's language, it's behaviors, and it's our actions. And even Jim Collins in his book, Good to Great, he calls it three things. It's disciplined thought, disciplined choice, disciplined action. The wonderful Dr. Stephen Covey, it's not what happens to us that determines us, it's our response. It's our choice. And so let's go there for a minute and think about kind of some examples of this idea of what we would term learner versus judger. And in my book on chapter 4, I have a lot of stuff around mindset, language, and even questions from a learner judger perspective, from a coaching perspective. How do I coach self, and how do I coach others? And as we start with that, the learner mindset is to be humble and open-minded, and to be positive, and to extend trust, and to be abundant, and to be curious, and to take time, slow down and listen, and ask questions, and be inclusive, and talk openly and honestly, show respect, right? To take responsibility, to think win-win. A lot of those things around learner, those are choices. In our moment of fear, of our moment of getting stuck, our moments of reactivity, we can reframe things to a learner mindset. And then there's a judger mindset. And that's really driven a lot by our ego, our title, our position. It could be a win-lose mindset, or win as much as you can, or I'm in charge, I'm the boss, I'm micromanaging, I'm telling people what to do, I'm directive. I could blame, shame, judge, and dismiss others. And so it shows up a lot with how I see others. Do I see them just as a cog in the wheel? Or do I see them as a whole person? Do I truly value them as an asset? Or do I see them as expense? And that's a lot with how I see not only myself, my security, my guidance, my wisdom, my power. If I'm coming from a place of security and abundance and curiosity, that's different than I'm coming from a place of scarcity and fear or ego, right? And that's, so one's going to come from the judger side. I'm right, you're wrong. I'm good, you're bad. If I want your opinion, I'll give it to you. Or it comes from that other side that says, you know what, you see it differently than I do. Tell me more about that. Let me be curious. I can be open. I can be creative. We run into a problem. Great. Let's talk about the problem. Let's put it up on the wall. Let's get together, brainstorm, talk, and be curious around that. And so those are really basis of our mindset, is the start of everything. Because I can either go yes and, or I go yes but. And let me fill in the blanks. And so as we think about what drives that mindset, a lot of times it could be the external environment, it could be fear, it could be technology, right? Even algorithms sort of pushing things out. that it's about efficiency, not effectiveness. It's about speed. We don't stop and slow down and step back. And so we're living in this world that's just lighting up our amygdala. This amygdala, from both fear and shame and blame and judgment, but also the technological world that is about speed and efficiency, can really light that up. And you see that right now with a lot of mental health issues, we call mental wellness. I mean, it's, John Huntsman, who has the Huntsman Cancer Research Center in Salt Lake City, before he died, he said to his son, David, the new cancer is not cancer. The new cancer is mental health and wellness, and what we'd, call this ability for us to think and reflect and have choice, right? Freedom. And so when we get into this judger mindset that's either driven by the outside world or even some of our own sort of negative narratives, cortisol kicks in, adrenaline kicks in, noradrenaline, norepinephrine kind of kicks in, and it gets us to this base instinctual, emotional, reactive response. It's fight or flight. It's fear, right? Or we just withdraw, we just silence. And as we learn to be aware of those judger responses and we reframe, we can go to this place of building questions as we coach others, or we listen empathically and we connect with others, that will reveal our words and our phrases and basically how we can get beyond getting stuck in this judger mindset to a place of building bridges, a place of third alternatives, a place of, collaboration and creativity. And so the prefrontal cortex is really aligned with certain kinds of learner mindset areas. It helps us overcome and reframe the judger. And what it also does is it releases a whole series of emotions that are not fight or flight or silence or ego driven. It's more based on collaboration, innovation, learning from failure, getting better. And oxytocin is released, and dopamine and serotonin, and these endorphins that help us to get smart when we get stuck. It helps us overcome judgment and fear and ego and gets into abundance and freedom and choice. And so in coaching, we always want to label what are some of those judger language type things. What are the judger behaviors? How's the ego getting in the way, right? How's the win-lose mindset or reactive mindset? How do we reframe that? And so what I like to do in coaching is with leaders, specifically at the top, where some leaders at the C-suite can't be vulnerable, they can't be open, or in teams, they can't even be honest because they're fearful, or they can't have failure. They're in a low trust environment, they can't even fail. And so we want to talk with leaders at first at a personal level, intrapersonal, and say, what are some of the drivers of those judgments? What are some of the fears, worries, and concerns? And how would you like things to be different, right? For self and for others. And so a lot of times you deal with pride and title and ego and the alpha male or the alpha female, and it's kind of silencing that inner critic. It's the ability to reframe and to say, let's talk about feedback on either the past or where you are, but let's pivot and move to the future on the great possibility of how you'd like to show up, how you'd like things to be different. And there's a lot of coaching that can become with reframing the story and saying, hey, I know when you're in a room, you silence yourself. You don't feel like your voice matters. Let's talk about that story. Why are you judging yourself? That inner critic, like, why are you silencing yourself? And then you kind of get into the truth story that says, tell me about your gifts, your strengths, your talents, your superpowers. Tell me about how you'd like to show up. With these behaviors, when you silence yourself, how can we reframe that? What kinds of questions can you ask in the room so your voice can emerge so you can help the team out as a whole? And those are breakthrough conversations. Those are breakthrough mindset shifts that get into language and questions. For example, I was working with one leader. She would continually silence herself in meetings. She was an engineer. She was bright. She was smart. And she looked around, and this was her narrative, judge your narrative. When I'm in the room, everyone's smarter than me. And then she started saying, my voice doesn't matter because everyone's smarter than me. And so she started silencing herself. And when we were talking in this coaching conversation, I says, is it true that you've hired people that are smarter than you? Yes. Is it true that they have different capabilities, strengths, and talents than you? Yes. Is it true that your voice doesn't matter? There was a long pause. And I said, that's a lie. And what can you do differently? Let's talk about your gifts, strengths, and talents. They would go tactical. They were engineers. They would root cause. They would go down 30,000 feet. When we took a step back, I said, what are your strengths? I execute well. I see the big picture. I see the customer's needs. I see different stakeholders' needs. I said, great. Let's talk about those learner behaviors and questions that you need to emerge with that are going to help you help your team, bless your team, help your team get through these tough issues you're dealing with. I said, great, let's role play. First off, what's a good question you can ask? About when people go down to the tactical, she would say, what other stakeholders need to be involved to help sponsor this initiative? Wow, you're looking big picture. What else? What types of outcomes do we want to drive towards? What are our desired results? What are the outcomes? Awesome. Begin with the end in mind. Help them see the big picture. What else? And as we talked about these things, what commitments should we make before we leave the room, either around stakeholders or around our results? Wow, okay, what else? Other behaviors, learner behaviors. What about accountability? How are we going to hold ourselves accountable? How often do we want to meet? How are we going to measure success? What does success look like? Yes, and all these abundant behaviors. So that helped us reframe the conversation. She went out and practiced it. We met about 30 days later, and I said, how did things go? She said, this has been the biggest game changer in my role as the leader of this group in my career. I am holding different learner conversations, and it starts with me. The most important conversation I have is myself. Why is that? Because I was silencing my voice, I was silencing my gifts, and I wasn't showing up as the best version of myself. Great. So these behaviors, stakeholder alignment, thinking abundantly, involving other people, big idea. Begin with the end in mind, thinking about desired results. What do we need to accomplish as a result of these great breakthroughs in engineering? Commitments. What are our commitments? Accountability. Also, she was injecting confidence into the team. I know we can do this. I have your back. Let me clear the path. What can I do to help? She went from a micromanager and fear and judgment to a place of abundance and bringing other people in, and it was game-changing. And I promise you, as you coach other people, these conversations, these silencing conversations are going on. AI will never in a million years be able to figure that out, ever. And even when you go up these old school styles of industrial versus knowledge work, even some of the old styles of management control and telling people what to do and fear-based and title and position-based or ego-based, that gets in the way of teams forming, storming, norming, performing, getting better. And the synergy that's tapped in the team. And it starts first with us having a learner judger perspective, sometimes people coaching us to help us get unstuck and to reframe the times where that inner saboteur comes in and starts knocking our knees out from underneath us. So my colleague, Marilee Adams, she's a really good friend from Columbia, and we've had a lot of conversations around this whole thing about, and you could call it proactive, reactive, you call it learner versus judger, you call it fixed versus growth, you call it optimism versus pessimism. Dr. Martin Seligman hits it. Dr. Marilee Adams hits it. We've got a lot of great work from Stanford, on the growth versus fixed, and even with Dr. Covey. It is game changing. It starts first with mindset. And the most important conversation is with yourself. Is it positive? Is it negative? And is it learner or is it judger? Now, I want to kind of switch here. I wanted to spend about half time on our mindset, our language. Let me just ask this question. Are emotions contagious for good or bad? Do they ripple either way?
Both.
Yeah.
Absolutely both. Yeah.
What about our mindset? Can our mindset be the problem of a lot of our language and our behaviors and even our results?
For sure.
Can we coach ourselves and can we coach others to shift and change when people get stuck on that judgment side, that fear side, that ego side? What are some of the barriers that might get in the way of people even being open to it? Any thoughts on that? Because people oftentimes operate unconsciously and they're not even aware, or they'll say, hey, we've got some derailing behaviors with Bob over here or Barbara, and they're not getting it. It's Monday morning. Don't upset them
Yeah.
because they're going to scorch the earth. But how do we create this awareness with others, and how do we coach others to help them move forward beyond this? Any thoughts on that?
So as you were talking, Michael, I was thinking like, okay, you have the judger learner, and I was like, I wonder why Michael chose that one. Why did you choose learner instead of, positive or growth, right?
Yeah.
And your question, um, I think that even it's just with mental health stuff too, but just I think a lot of it like starts with just competence, just learning, right? Like learning about that.
Yeah.
I think if a lot of people understood the, just emotional intelligence, the overall just sort of yeah, just kind of understood that more and like learned about it, that opens up a whole world of just more well-being, and probably all it would affect all of these people, all of these things, because there's emotional contagion that happens, right? When somebody's in a good mindset, and your mindset is contagious, I think.
Yeah.
So I think I think that was just something that stood out to me, learning
Yeah.
about it, right?
Yeah. Cam, I appreciate you saying that. And I would say even here at our school, we just had a mental health day we're partnered with IHC, U of U Health, and also the Huntsman Mental Health Center. And we've got pathway programs with our young kids who are partnered with PhDs talking about mental health. And you wouldn't believe the number of families and children that are dealing with this issue right now.
Mm.
And the first thing is you got to overcome the shame. Most families and communities won't even talk about it. There's something like there's just some shame associated. And so people, if they're dealing with this silent aspect of self, put aside stress and anxiety and fear or ego, there's the whole side about self-regulation and this mental health side that are combined. It's all interrelated. And so we can meet people wherever they are on that continuum. But the first thing is around awareness. The second is around choice. And there's tremendous freedom with choice. When I understand it, and I can see the triggers, or I can see these faulty core beliefs, or these false paradigms, or these negative conversations that come in, there's tremendous things I can do to reframe that from a learner perspective. And it's all about choice. It's also, you think about psychological safety, that people can't even talk about stuff if they don't feel psychologically safe. So as a leader, as my friend Dr. Tim Clark would say this, if as a leader you're not creating psychological safety at the top, you don't belong in leadership. That's a strong statement. You don't belong, and I would say the same thing with EQ. As we're evolving and getting better, doesn't mean we're not going to have our bad days, and we're not going to be controlling at times and show up. But as long as we have some of these principles to hold on to of EQ, of learner versus judger. And I would say judger is not bad, but what if you're showing up in your relationships 80% of the time as a judger? How is that impacting your language? How is it impacting your emotions and how you speak and behave? And how is that impacting your results? And then the other side is, what if you're showing up 80% of the time as a learner? How is that impacting your language, even your mindset on self and others? How is it showing up in your actions? How is that going to impact your results? So it's not that learner is right and judge is wrong. Sometimes we need to judge, but it's 80%, 20%. Because what happens is everyone has the inner saboteur. Everyone does. I went through this Harvard coaching program, and there's like 8 of them that show up for everybody. And then you choose which one you have, because you're going to have some dominant saboteurs. Some's going to be entitlement on the victim side, and some's going to be shame on the victim side, right? And they're going to show up in different ways. The rules don't apply to me, and I'm above the, or hey, I suck, you suck. I'm bad, you're bad. And that victim side, where I'm going to go victim and drama, right? I'm going to shame self, and I'm going to go around shaming and blaming everyone else. And so it's going to play out in different ways, but we all have it. So back to your point, Cam, we got to be aware of it and say, what's the learning and the curiosity, not from just a feedback perspective, what gets us in the past and in the current state, but it's all about coaching. Let's get creative and curious and brainstorm and look at, how do we want it to look different? How can I rewrite my story? And right now we're working with kids. Everyone's genius, everyone's a leader, and everyone's proactive and has choice. And the society is either further exacerbated and say, you silence other people that don't agree with you, you shame people that don't agree with you, and then you come out and you basically become a victim to everything that's going on around you. Not my responsibility, it's their fault. And it's just this exacerbated thing in our society that's even heating this thing up and putting gasoline on. And then you add in AI, things get really interesting. So thank you for bringing that up. Let me hit on the couple principles on the whole person. I've got a whole section in my book. It's on chapter 14 on whole person. So I'll just kind of touch on a couple key areas. A lot of times in work with executives, with even the high school, 100% of our kids have mission statements. 100% of our kids have whole person goal setting. I've done it with all my 4 boys for years. Every December we sit down, we're doing our whole person game plans. We're like, come on, Dad. But it gives tremendous focus. So we start with mission. What's my purpose? What's my contribution? What's my meaning? And then we go to values. What's my identity? What's my power, my source of power? Is it outside self, inside self? And we make sure we're explicit on those things. And then we have a vision of ourself. Where do we want to be in the next 5 to 10 years? Where do we want to be at the end of our life? Or for those that have a spiritual context, where do you want to be after this life? There's a vision context that you can play with people to say, I can think 5 to 10 years out, or I can think 50 years out, or I can think about even a world beyond this. So working in those 3 areas are the compass and the North Star for all of us. And then we get into the SMART strategic goals, which are kind of 5 key areas. Number 1 is financial growth, revenue, budgets, savings. Most people aren't good at financial literacy. Even here at our school, we have a financial literacy class. People learn about cash and margin and velocity and growth. And we need to understand the economic dimension, because we don't want to be stuck in food, clothing, shelter, and water. As our wonderful friend Abraham Maslow said, those are baseline needs. We've got to go upstream from that. Health and wellness. It's our vitality. It's our sleep. It's our nutrition. It's our exercise. It's all the endorphins that are released as we take care of ourselves. Self-care is not selfish. And also, having a balanced life, there's no such thing as balance. You're always going to spend more time at work than you will in your personal life. So we call it whole person harmony, whole person integration, that they fuel each other, but you're never going to be in balance. Even when you retire, you'll probably, the scales will tip in the other direction. Then there's the social emotional. That's my relationships. That's my connections. That's my network. It's my partnerships. Am I fueling and spending time there? The 4th, what's my job and career? What's my skills, competencies, and capabilities, my strengths I bring to the world? Or what's my academic, if I'm younger, and my career path based on strengths, based on market opportunities? And again, we spent a lot of time there with the kids here saying, hey, we love underwater basket weaving as a degree, but it may not get you to where you want to go over time. So let's look at, various paths. Pursue your strengths and what you love, but also that hits a market need. And then we've got the last one, which is the spiritual. And that means many different things for many different people. It's tapping into your inner self, your greater self, that's greater than self, which is a mission and a purpose and a contribution. And so as we go into that, we want to think about SMART goals, which basically means they're specific, right? They're focused, they're measurable. We got a valid measure and we know what success looks like. They're attainable, they're realistic, they're stretch. They're also time bound. We've got an X to Y by when, or we've got a time where we want to complete them. And we want to think the short game, then we want to think the medium game, and then we want to think the long game. We don't just want to get stuck in 1 year. We want to think multi-year and in a whole person way. Now, Clayton Christensen, he was on our board of directors for a number of years, and we've had a chance to get to know him pretty well. But he wrote a book called How Will You Measure Your Life? Tremendous book. He's also done The Innovator's Dilemma, a lot of great work on innovation. But he says, you can talk all you want about having a clear purpose and a strategy for your life. But ultimately, it means nothing if you're not investing in the greatest resource that you have, you and your time, in a way that's consistent with your mission, values, strategy. And so spending this time, it's an ongoing conversation. It's not just once a year, but it's an ongoing conversation that those leaders that are great, that have focus and clarity, do this well. So my question to you, my friends, is how many of you have done anything like whole person goal planning, or is there been anything around that's been motivational for you? What aspects seem to really resonate for you in being motivational? Any thoughts from my colleagues here? Where have you spent your time? Where do you like to spend your time? What's most motivational?
I try to hit the gym about 3 times a week, and it's not even just the physical part because I go with my son, and so as a matter of fact, I'm the guest on his membership, so I can't go unless he goes. As a matter of fact, today we were supposed to go at 5 a.m. I got up, got ready. He for whatever reason wasn't there, so I didn't get the gym this morning. But anyways, on the way there, on the way back, or whatever, we'll have some conversation as well. So it takes care of a couple of things. And then while I'm there, I'm listening to a podcast where I'm learning. So I'm working out, I'm learning with my podcast, and I'm working on my relationships. So that's a good one.
We think about leverage. That one activity is not just working on the physical health wellness, it's leverage for multiple. So we can combine it and think about how busy the world gets. What about the time when you're home, and how much time are you away from home?
Mm-hmm.
And when you are home, what are those leveraged moments of a date night, or a walk and talk, or a sit and chat, or dinners, or a way where you get community together, your family or people you love and care about, and you combine it in a leveraged way in that small amount of time? That has leverage. That has harmony. Doesn't have full balance, Zen Buddha, lotus position balance, but it has reality that connects you in leveraged ways. Other thoughts from your experience with leverage and balance?
Yeah, I'll share super quick. So very similar, Derek, to your input and insight. Last year, one of the things that we started in helping to get like a daily pulse on goals that we've set as a couple and a family is our daily walks in the morning. And that's the opportunity for us to call what we call unwrapping the axle, things that maybe during the previous day or what it looked like gave us some pause. So we unwrap the axle and then, as always, probably celebrate wins that are just insignificant at the moment, but feel really good, like stacking Legos. So we spend our time on morning walks stacking Legos and unwrapping the
Yeah.
axle, which is anchored to goals that we've set for ourselves for the year.
Yeah.
And then second, I would share personally, for me this year, one of the things that I have wrapped around my goal setting has been better external relationships. I have a tendency to get really hyper focused on what's immediately in front of me in terms of my role, and I've neglected networking and building broader relationships outside of my intended discipline. So those are two areas that are anchored to what our goals look like for, I would say, the next 2 years for us.
Great. Jen, thank you. And
Yeah.
Jen, also, when we were together at GE. We were doing work together, and we were in South Dakota at one of our offsites. She shared some amazing information on that second area for her personally, some goals and some strategies and things she was doing. It was like game changing. It was
Yeah.
inspiring and I think you shared it with the whole room, and it was like, I need to step up my game.
No.
That's what I
You know
just
what I mean?
thought. I just thought about that. She said, I was like, yeah, that's a really good thing to do as a couple too. I'm like, I gotta set that into, I gotta do that better.
Now,
Yeah.
we're not trying to, guilt or shame anybody
No, not at all.
No, yeah.
into
So,
goals.
so this tool right here is a great way to just do an assessment, right?
Mhm.
It's just says that we're probably going to be uncalibrated
Mhm.
in different areas or at different times, right?
Yeah.
And when you're raising a young family versus when you got an empty nest, or when you're in the first part of your career versus later, there's times and seasons, right?
Yeah.
And we've got a daughter-in-law who's getting ready to have her first child, our first grandchild, in March in Houston, and it's like, don't worry about anything right now other than your baby. like
Mhm.
like you push everything off the table. It's you and connecting with your child over the net, and everything else is outsourced. Like you got, your mother-in-law, you got your mom, we got the like we got it. Like we're here. We're all in for, a couple weeks, but you need to worry about one thing: connecting with your baby. That's it. So we have these moments and these seasons, right? And this just allows us to say, this is where the fun part comes in. Where do I choose to play? And it may just be in one area. My wife and I are two ships passing in the night. She's busy, but let's make sure we stay true to our date night. Let's stay true to our Sunday ritual of getting together and spending the day together and walking and talking. We go for a walk on Sunday, a long walk. We solve most of the world's problems in that time. So, so you look at where you are and you look 1 to 5, and you can sort of analyze this. And then there's a
Well, that's
series of,
great, Michael. And just time check. You got about 5 minutes.
okay,
You can
so
wrap
I'll
it.
go quick. So here's an example in the book of different examples in each of these areas. And I like to just put them out there so people, you don't need to do any of that stuff, but it should trigger some thoughts in the areas that you've assessed and looked at with yourself, where you want to play and where you want to contribute, or where you might have some pain, or you've been neglecting it for a while. And then I like to do this is, I'll send my boys out. We'll read some kind of spiritual things, and we'll talk about some other things, and we'll send them off in the house, and they go off for an hour, and they're reminded of some things that are important. But then they come back, and even with leaders, I'll have them spend a week or two on this, and they'll come back and we'll talk about it. And we'll say, okay, prioritize which ones are most. But we think short game, we think medium game, and then a lot of stuff is let's get into vision and innovation and what if and possibilities. Let's get into dream state a little bit. And let's just start creating. What does Peter Drucker say? The best way to predict your future is to create it. And we create it in our mind. We ideate, we visualize. Okay. And then we also want to make sure we consider our strengths. A lot of stuff from Marcus Buckingham and from Don Clifton and Tom Rath on Strength Finders. Play to 80% of your strengths. Do not spend your life trying to close your gaps on your weaknesses. That's an old HR paradigm where you get assessed and you close your gaps your whole life. And you're going to be walking on shards of glass and with bamboo shoots up your fingernails for a whole career if you do that. Don't play that game. Go 80% strengths, 20% gaps and areas of improvement, and play to your gifts and strengths and talents and superpowers. And how do you capitalize on that? And then in closing, think about this. I'll go back to where I started with Jim Collins. You want to go from good to great. It's going to start with disciplined thought, disciplined choice, and disciplined action. And think about this. Don't just think about the day or the week. You got to think about the month, the quarter, the year. And I'm also going to push you. I want you to think multi-year. And then you're going to say, how do I invest and leverage and multiply my time, my talents, my money, my resources and network to those areas in a whole person way? And that drives passion. It drives excitement and motivation and engagement, especially when you involve other people in your stakeholder and your network group. And I would even say, Derek, who I've partnered with on the Simpson executive coaching side and also with Cam, there's no way I'd be as far as along I am on the content side without Cam, or on the tapping into network and re-engaging and even doing events like this. That's all quadrant 2 stuff. It's all important but not urgent, because I have partners around me that help me push forward in our vision, our strategy, and things we want to do on the planet to make a difference. And so surrounding yourself with a network of people, you can't do it alone. You need to partner with people you trust, people that make up for the difference, that have strengths where you don't, have resources and capabilities. And then you just kind of put it out there and see where it goes and have some fun. So for those of you that would like to, be engaged with Simpson Executive Coaching, we're creating a database, we're creating a network. We're going to have a lot of these webinars every month. We give you full access to all the tools and content and resources. And if there's opportunities for us to play with executive teams or partner in any ways that are interesting or unique, we're open to that. And we've got Derek's contact info there. We definitely want to be a resource to the planet. And again, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules. Hopefully you picked up a couple tools in the toolbox and some things you can work on, and all the best to you on your exciting and purposeful journey. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Michael. That was
Appreciate you.
great content, and appreciate whatever you added to it again just recently, because again, this is stuff that's from his book, but he's always having current and relevant and timely additional information that he adds. So glad to have you on the webcast today, everybody that joined. Have a great weekend, and we look forward to having the opportunity to partner with you at some point down the road.
Jen, our paths are going to be crossing, I can tell, somehow, some way. We don't know where, but they're going to be crossing.